Undertale. It seems every analysis imaginable about this game has already been done before. From the story, the characters, the music, the general mechanics of the game, the fandom. Heck, even I made 2 videos about it just for good measure. But what if, I ask, there was yet another point of view from which this game could be dissected? One that would reveal huge implications about its plot and purpose. It's only a possibility, but I'd say taking a look at it is quite interesting nonetheless. One of the big noticeable qualities of Undertale is that it's not shy of constantly breaking the fourth wall. The game clearly wants the player to know that its plot goes well beyond the confines of the screen. This is made all the more clear when characters such as Sans or Flowey address the player and use the mechanics and the rules of the game to their advantage. But if the player is directly involved within the narrative of the story, then wouldn't it be logical to assume that the creator is as well? After all, since it's established that the player is an entity beyond the limits of the universe of the game, but is still capable of having a presence within it and being acknowledged by its inhabitants, then Tobifox should have a presence just as well, and as such, he should play a role in the story. Which role, you ask? The answer is quite simple. He is the entity that created the world and its inhabitants. The follow-up question is what really inspired me to reanalyze Undertale as a whole. Why? Why did Tobifox create Undertale? Or rather, what is the purpose of Undertale? Personally, I believe Undertale is unique from other media and video games in that its final goal does not seem to be simply to entertain or to tell a story. Rather, I believe it is an experience designed to prove a point. I mean, I don't think I'm exactly breaking new ground when I claim that the final goal of Undertale is to be a social experiment of sorts with the purpose of revealing the true mindset assumed by those who are playing a game. I think I can prove this point mostly through a characteristic of the game that is often criticized, the fact that it is preachy. Many people are annoyed with the fact that Tobifox seems to be constantly pushing his own agenda and his own moral values onto the player as they traverse through the underground. Anytime you do anything even remotely naughty, the game keeps calling you out and nagging you about it. But isn't there a contradiction here? I mean, if the creator really was such a preachy, strict person, then why in the heck would he create a game where the core idea is that the player gets to choose if they want to spare or kill enemies? He could have made it so that the only possibility was being a pacifist, but he didn't. Furthermore, not only did he create a genocide route, but he hid it as well, almost as if he knew that people would find it, or rather, he wanted people to discover it through killing. So if the creator intended the players to experience all the routes that the game has to offer, then what would be the point of being preachy or encouraging certain behaviors over others? You might say that the goal of the genocide route is to show how sad and wrong violence is, but I believe Tobifox proves himself with his dialogue to be a lot smarter and cynical to make the message of his game so utterly simple and uninteresting. Rather, I prefer to interpret the general preachiness in the narrative of Undertale as means to the game's end, and its function would be to remind the player how they would behave in real life. Asking you not to kill would be perfectly normal in the real world after all, as would be demanding you to obey authorities that enforce certain laws and codes of behavior. But in a video game, as long as it's single player, the mind of a person is freed from all sorts of physical and mental barriers, such as morality or justice, and the person cares for the game and its plot only as means of entertainment. Undertale creates a universe and characters that are bound by the same sense of justice and morality as that of the real world, but then gives the player the power and the freedom to break them, without having to face any responsibilities or punishment. Thus, the difference of behavior between human and player become that much more apparent. Notice as well how both through its advertising and through the tutorial, the game makes sure to let the player know that the pacifist option is there, that monsters are willing to befriend you if you give them the chance. That way, there's no room for excuses. Even if you want to say that you attacked in self-defense, deep down you know you chose to kill when you could have decided not to. If you agree with me that Undertale is indeed an experiment, or rather an experience designed to prove a point, then suddenly several of its aspects seem a lot darker. Look at the characters for instance. They are all so utterly pure and innocent. Often I have to remind myself that since it breaks the fourth wall, this is a game that's aware and to an extent depends on the worst parts of human nature. Irrationality, sin, corruption, hate. But none of these traits are found anywhere within this universe. For the sake of his objective, Tobifox created the most appealing reality possible, one that is dominated by pure and simple feelings of friendship and love, that are, for the most part, devoid of human flaws. A world where all you need to make friends is goodwill, a world devoid of rejection, a world where, even if the characters are not perfect, the mistakes in their judgments and decisions are always simple and unchallenging. For these qualities and more, such as the very smart writing, many have fell in love with the story found in the pacifist route of the game. But Undertale doesn't limit itself to offer this image of a beautiful world. That is not its purpose. It is merely, again, a means to an end. Ultimately, Tobifox created a universe designed meticulously to be as appealing and innocent as possible, with the sole purpose of players eventually resetting the game and destroying it, thus proving his point. But it's interesting how in his product made to show how terrible the character of the player would be from the perspective of the in-universe inhabitants of the game, he himself ends up playing the worst role of all. Have you ever sat down and wondered, what is the meaning of life? Well, if you did that as an Undertale character, the answer would be to suffer and die. Your pure and positive personality, it was given to you so that it might be seen and experienced by a creepy mute child controlled by an all-powerful emotionless entity so that he might eventually ignore it and kill you, either out of boredom or curiosity. And you are lucky if that's the end of your sufferings, because that very same dick entity also has the power to reset the universe, of course erasing your memories in the process, and kill you over and over and over again, or at least keep you in your underground prison forever. And at this point you might be wondering, gee, who decided to give my race such a tragic backstory in which nearly all of us get killed and then we get locked up in the underground, and who decided to leave our fates in the hands of some maniacal all-powerful being, and who gave that being so much power to the point that he can literally destroy the space and time continuum? How would you feel if your position in the world and your personality were not truly yours? If I told you that they were meticulously designed as tools to deliver a message that has nothing to do with you or the world you know, to entities that you will never really meet? How would you feel if your purpose in life was so insignificant and had complete disregard for your own personal feelings and aspirations? I think now you can understand how, from my point of view, the universe of Undertale seems utterly depressing in its innocence. The characters live their everyday life very similarly to ourselves, seeking friendship, happiness, and just general well-being. But it's sad to think that the creator that put them there in the first place had no such things in mind. In fact, he gave them those desires and aspirations without ever intending to satisfy them, and instead left that in the hands of the players, knowing very well that most of them would pursue the genocide run that he himself made possible to go through. But by far the two most tragic figures from this point of view are Azrael and Sans. Azrael, an innocent child who more than anybody would want his world and his loved ones to live a peaceful life, ends up being one of the main reasons for people to reset the game. People who are filled with desire of saving him, but will never truly manage to do it. He's pretty much treated like a carrot on a string, with complete disregard for his emotions. In the eyes of the creator, he's just another tool meant to shape the experience of the player, and nothing more. And Sans, on the other hand, is the one character who was given a higher state of consciousness. In an impossibly perfect world, Sans is the only one aware of what's happening, and because of that, he's the only character who's grown to be truly cynical, and has developed to be more complex and mature than the rest. The effects of him being so different are quite noticeable. To fit in with the rest of the world, he puts up a persona. He plays the role of a goofy comedic relief character when he truly is anything but, and at the same time he can't help but feel attached to his world nonetheless, as it's shown that he loves his brother. So yeah, we players are potentially responsible for many of his sufferings, but ultimately, the person behind his feeling of detachment and utter isolation from the rest of the world, and for the constant existential crisis that he's forced to suffer through, is not us, but Tobifox himself. Now, to anyone who might be thinking, oh how groundbreaking, you are saying that authors are responsible for the sad things that happen in their stories, that's so obvious. I think you might have missed the point of this video. The difference between a standard story found in any other media and Undertale lays mostly in their dimensions and intentions. To sum it up, in his attempt to prove how from the point of view of the in-universe characters of a game, the player seems like an all-powerful, emotionless and obsessed freak, Tobifox ended up proving at the same time that in this regard, he himself is far worse. Basically, the person that makes all the evil he criticizes so much possible is himself, but that's a role he was forced to assume if he really wanted to bring his project to life.